Cornerhouse Studios. Today we'll be doing something a little different. Some of you in the past few weeks have asked me to show you around the studio, and that's exactly what we'll be doing today. I'll be taking you for a short studio tour. Thanks to Jean for filming this. So what do you think? Shall we start?
Yep.
Plan. So, first room of the studio is the kitchen, and on this wall is the CD rack of local music. In this collection, basically, you'll find multiple local artists, namely Red Electric, Fire, Canvas Wall, Travelers, Salt, the Bay Music Awards, Funk Initiative, Dan McKeon, etc., etc. And yes, also including artists who also produce and sing music in Maltese. Promote local. Moving on is this little feature wall with some motivational posters and some inspirational ones as well. You have your John Mayer, your Queen poster as well, and some pop culture references, Stranger Things for the win. Also, some nice conversation pieces that is basically a small collection of books and magazines I've amassed over the past few years. Here in the Cornerhouse.
Roadhouse.
House.
Cornerhouse.
Thank you, Sean. Basically an acoustic guitar, because you never know when inspiration strikes. Basically hanging in the kitchen or in the bathroom, but I don't have an acoustic guitar in the bathroom yet. The studio couch, and the trusty neon Taylor guitar sign in the corner here. Moving on is the kitchen. You have your kitchen countertop and, very important, your warm caffeinated beverage to keep you going during a hard studio day. But yes, in the cupboards you'll find your stash of coffee and sugar, accompanied by more alcohol, and the plates and eating utensils, as well as the stash to keep you hydrated. Always stay hydrated. Oh, and also the studio fridge, which is disguised as a Marshall amplifier, which goes to 11.
These go to 11?
Yes, it actually is a fridge, with your healthy soy milk, accompanied by your daily dose of Jaeger, and more beer and water and the likes. So that's it for the kitchen. Moving on to the corridor, more shelves, because you never run out of storage space. The bathroom, very important. And here we have storage room A. So this is the studio live room / rehearsal space. As you can see, it's split into sections. Starting here, we have the PA system, which we use for rehearsals and live recordings as well. If you like to see the video of how this rack came to be, just click on the link somewhere over here. So yes, we have an X32, which is the brains of the whole system, which provides us for rehearsing and setting our own monitor mix, as well as recording the rehearsals if needs be. Moving on to the studio's resident drum kit. This is a DW 7-piece collector series kit in satin burnt toast fade finish. Did I get it right, John?
Yep.
Basically, the kit comprises of an 8, 10, 12, 14 and 16 inch toms, a kick and a snare. The reason why you have a 7-piece kit here is basically to accommodate any style of configuration the said drummer would want to have his kit set up in. Moving on to microphones, just a brief explanation of what the kit is mic'd up here with. We have as overheads a pair of Coles, actually STC 4038s. The toms down here are mic'd up with Sennheiser's MD 421s. And here we have a pair of Neumann KM84s, one set up over here for the hi-hats and one over here as a secondary snare mic which is paired usually with an SM57, and another trusty old SM57 as a snare bottom. Moving on to the kick mic, we currently have a Beta 52A, a Shure Beta as a kick in mic, and a Yamaha sub kick as a kick out. Over here we have a small collection of pedals that usually come in handy for any recording sessions, from an old Electro Harmonix micro synth to Line 6 M5, your whammy, a trusty tube screamer, DS1 distortion, your wah, the Honey Badger fuzz, etc, etc. Next section is one of my personal favorites, the guitar amp section. Starting here is a Mesa dual rectifier from the mid-2000s, and underneath is a Marshall 4x12 cab. The speakers in this cab have been swapped out. They don't have the original G12T75s, but they have a pair of vintage 30s and a pair of greenbacks configured in an X position. Next is a Victory head and cab. The Victory is a vertical 2x12 cab with two vintage 30s. And the head here is a V30 Mark II, the Countess. Next is another Victory head, which is Rob Chapman's signature head. Don't let the size fool you. This is actually quite a little mean beast.
It is a mean beast indeed.
Underneath the RD1 is a Vox AC30 from 1964, and next to it is another oldie, which is a 1965 Fender Twin Reverb amp. It gets ear-bleedingly loud, however, stays very clean. The final amp here is a bass amp. The head is a Gallien-Kruger 800 RB. We also have another amp in the corridor, which is an Ampeg Portaflex from 1967, and a 4x10 Gallien-Kruger cab lent to the studio courtesy of Ivan Borch from Red Electric. Thank you, Ivan Borch.
You're welcome, bro.
Moving on to the keys section, this is the piano my parents had bought me when I started taking up guitar lessons. This is the piano my parents had bought me when I started taking up piano lessons at the age of 6. Most people ask me why I like to keep the lid off. It's basically because I like to have the mics up front, and which gives a more open sound without the lid. With the lid, it's a bit more boxy. Over here we have Joe from Relix. Hello, Joe.
Sup?
Yamaha MODX8, and this Rhodes 54 also belongs to Joe. Over here we have a Moog Etherwave Plus Theremin, which I decided to buy to keep me busy during while I was staying indoors during COVID. So I basically decided to see whether I could learn a new instrument while staying indoors, and a theremin is actually harder to learn than I thought. One final thing about this room is that it's built as a room within a room. So the reason for that is for soundproofing. We actually did not want any external sounds to enter the studio whilst recording, and even vice versa. We didn't want any sounds coming from here to disturb anyone outside, namely neighbors and the like. So, on page 2. This is the larger of the two storage rooms. This is basically where more bulky items are stored, namely guitar cases, microphone cases, and amplifier head cases and other rack units, etc. Down here we have the rest of the microphone collection. Just a quick run through. We have an RCA 77DX, a pair of AKG C451Es, another SM57, a Shure SM7B, an Electro Voice RE20, a Neumann U87, a pair of AKG C414s, and an AKG D112. Moving on here is where I like to keep the boxes of items that I buy. The reason being is, apart from the fact that I am kind of a bit of a box hoarder, is that in the event that I would actually end up selling one of these items, it's always nice to send the item back to the buyer in a similar condition or somewhat similar condition to the one that you have bought it in. Moving on down here, this is starting from the left, we have the rest of the kit's toms and also a nice collection of skins, extra skins, thanks to Jean.
Welcome.
Onto the final wall of the storage room, these are some EV SX300 passive speakers. These are used for when basically a band rents out the live room to rehearse, and maybe they're not used to having in-ear monitors, they're used to having a wedge on the floor. This will cater for them as well. So that brings us to the end of storage room B. Onto the control room. So starting on my left is the studio's 3 synths. At the top we have a Moog Sub 37, a Nord Lead 2 and a Juno 106. These are all connected via MIDI to a Mo2 MIDI Express MIDI interface, and they're all connected, powered up via this Furman PL Plus CE. At the bottom is my trusty Helix, and on the side is a Midas Venice 160 mixer. The reason why the mixer is still on the floor is because I have a rack being built for it, which will eventually bring it to a more convenient height. The function of this mixer is to have all the Synths hooked up to it, and also the 8 preamps are hooked up to the system and can be used as 8 extra preamps for when recording a slightly larger session. Moving up here is the Argo Z desk, which has 2 rack bays on each side. The right rack houses my preamps. We have 2 Neve 1073 preamps, an API rack with 4 512C preamps, an Avalon AD2022, and the Focusrite ISA 828. In the center section, we have a DAW controller, which is made up of 2 Avid Artist mixes and a Euphonics MC transport. And over here we have my Mackie Big Knob. The Big Knob has actually 3 pairs of monitors connected to it. The trusty pair of Yamaha NS10M speakers, Orotone mix cubes, and my main monitors, which are a pair of Genelec 1031A speakers. To the left of the Big Knob is the hardware controller for the TC Electronic 2290 digital delay plugin, and a Softube Console 1 hardware controller as well, which controls plugin. Pro Tools is my main DAW of choice. As you can see, I have it split, the edit view on one screen and the mixer view on the other. So the left rack bay is where most of the connections from the other 2 rooms terminate. The first contains of combi connections. Reason being, let's say you have a guitarist in the control room and he has his cabinet in either the vocal booth or the live room. He can simply place his head here, tweak the settings, but have his cabinet mic'd in a different room. The numbers on the speak-ons actually correspond to the patch panels in the other room. Same on the second tier of connections. These are TRS connections labeled from 1 to 8, but in this situation, maybe you have a guitarist or a bassist who has his amp in another room, a combo amp. So he can just plug in a TRS, an actual instrument cable, to either of these connections, and the combo will correspond next to the panel according to where he places it in the other rooms. Moving further along down, you have your Furman, which actually powers up all of these units in the Argo Z desk. And underneath the Furman is the Antelope Orion 32 Plus interface, which is a 32 in, 32 out interface. Further below, you have the Bantam patch panels, which eventually correspond to each of the panels in the rooms, and as well correspond to the Outboard Gear. And speaking of Outboard Gear, this is a desk which acts both as a workspace for anyone visiting in on a session, but also houses the outboard gear of the studio. Starting from the right side of the rack, we have a Yamaha SPX90 effects rack. Here we have the firmament, which is powering all of the external outboard gear. Underneath the firmament, we have two mono compressors, an original U-Ray 1176 and an EL8 distressor. And on this side, this is where we have our stereo compression. Basically, we have our 266XL DBX compressor / gate, our SSL G-bus compressor in a single rack unit format, and a dual DBX FS900 module with two 902 DSers in it. So apart from having the control room isolated from the building structure, it's also acoustically treated. You have two wall bass traps by Art Nouveau here, your run-of-the-mill T-acoustic diffusers at the back, 4 more bass traps at the upper left and right corners, and also just above the listening position here, the sweet spot, you have 4 hybrid diffusers from Art Nouveau as well. Moving on to the final room of the studio is the vocal booth or isolation booth. This room is basically used for when you want to track a source in a rather dry environment. Starting down here, we have a 2x12 DIY pine guitar cabinet, which is set up with an SM57 and a Royer R121 ribbon microphone. These are connected to the patch panel over here and obviously terminates at the Argosy as mentioned earlier. So, being a vocal booth, it's important not to leave out the main vocal mic. This is an AKG C12 VR, set up with a windshield and a C Electronics windshield and a K&M pop filter. Here we can also find one of the personal mixers as mentioned earlier, labelled the same way as all the others for a convenient headphone mix. I guess that brings us to the end, this being the final room of the studio. So that brings us to the conclusion of this video. I hope you enjoyed the studio tour. Please make sure to like and subscribe, and if you have any more queries about the studio, make sure to leave a comment below. Please also make sure to follow the studio's Instagram page at Cornerhouse Studios. But until next time, take care.